Hi, everyone. Welcome back to She Blurbs podcast. Today's guest is Liz Butcher. Hi, Liz.
Hi, how are you?
Thank you for being a guest today on my podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yes, so I'm an indie author here in Australia. Published my first book back in 2018, and I write primarily horror and dark fiction.
Nice. That's amazing. So, when did you first realize you wanted to be an author?
Probably back in about 2012, I sort of had this story idea niggling in my head, and it wouldn't go away. So I thought, why not give it a shot and see what happens?
That's awesome. How many books have you written so far?
Four, so three standalone novels and a collection of short stories.
Nice. That's amazing. I did see on your website. I'm definitely going to be purchasing a few books because
Oh,
that's
thank you.
love. I love, love, love horror.
Oh,
That's
excellent.
my thing.
Yeah.
So, where do you get your ideas from when you think of your stories?
Oh, all over the place. I have endless ideas. They just always come out of nowhere. Sometimes they come from dreams or things I kind of just see, but usually just randomly pop into my head. I'm just one of those lucky people that I don't have any trouble coming up with ideas. If anything, it's the opposite. I've got more ideas than I've got time to actually do anything with. So
So, okay, what type of horror movies, I mean, not movies, horror novels do you write, though? Like, is it like ghost stories or is it like slasher or?
yeah, more sort of suspenseful horror. So not a lot of sort of slasher gore type stuff. More yeah, suspense. So paranormal usually. But I like that. I like playing with people's heads and messing with them a little bit. So it's kind of a lot of psychological tension in my horror.
Oh, nice. Kind of like Saw, sort of, kind of, like a little bit how he messes with people's minds.
Yeah, kind of a little bit without all the gore that comes with
Yeah.
Saw. But yeah, my books do, I think, mess with people a little bit, which I think is fun.
Yeah. So they make you think and stuff. They make the reader think and like,
Yeah, I like to make things not obvious, so I like to try and keep the reader guessing up until the end, and then kind of smack them with a big twist that they don't see coming. So that's how I roll.
that's awesome. So what does your family think about your writing?
Yeah, they're incredibly supportive. My Poppy was very proud. He had read everything that I'd ever written. Unfortunately, he passed away 18 months ago, but he was my biggest fan. And my mum reads them to a point, but she's not a huge fan of anything too scary. So she might take a really long time to read anything. And my sister's really supportive, but she doesn't do horror. So every time I publish something, she's like, "Is it scary?" I'm like, "Yeah, you won't like it."
That's awesome. So what inspired you to write your novels?
Oh, all different things. Are basically just ideas that wouldn't go away. You know, you kind of have them fermenting in the back of your mind all the time, and it's almost like a relief to start writing them, because then it kind of quietens your head a little bit. So that's sort of how I decide which book's going to be next. It's whichever idea won't stop annoying me until I start putting pen to paper.
Yes. See, that's
Mm-hmm.
what I do, but I mostly have dreams and then I'm gonna start going to bed with a pen and paper and like writing in my dreams so I'll know like, hey, this is a good story.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So can you give our listeners like a brief summary of a few of your novels?
Yeah, so my first standalone novel, Fate's Fury, is a combination of sort of mythology and horror, and it's about the end of the world. Essentially, the Fates have come back to Earth to get rid of man. They've decided that we've made a mess of things, we're unsalvageable, and they want to start fresh without us. And all of this sort of activity starts happening, centering around this group of three friends that find themselves in the middle of it and they're not too sure why. And then we have an alliance of ancient gods from a group of the old pantheon. So we've got Greek and Egyptian and so forth that come back to try and help us defend ourselves. But sort of the end game is, what are we actually fighting for, and do we really deserve another chance? So that's Fate's Fury. And then LeRoux Manor is straight out horror, about a girl who has to move to the other side of the world when her father inherits the family manor from his estranged uncle. And as soon as she gets there, she starts feeling very strange. And she finds in the attic a bunch of old albums, and there's a newspaper clipping from the day 150 years beforehand when the manor was launched, where her ancestor was found dead, and his 5-year-old daughter vanished without a trace. And she discovers she's the first female born into the family line since that day. So she starts trying to work out exactly what happened, and the more she finds out, the scarier things get.
Wow.
Then I've got my recent release, which came out last month, I think it was, Never Never, which is a Peter Pan retelling, but it's set in the here and now. And Wendy Darling, for those who might remember, the classic tale was a girl in the original story. Now she's a 30-year-old detective, haunted by the trauma of her teenage abduction at the hands of the entity Pan. And a local girl goes missing the same day that her mother passes away, very much the same way that she did, just vanishes from her room in the middle of the night. And so she starts working the case, and the more she works on the case, the more skeletons come out of her own family's closet, and she finds out just how, I guess, intricate her connection with Pan really is.
That sounds
And there you go.
wow. All of those books sound really, really interesting. I'm gonna have to check those out. So
Please do.
they do, really do. So who are a few of your favorite authors, and have any of them inspired a few of your novels?
Probably my two most favorite authors would be Stephen King. I read my first Stephen King book when I was like 10 years old, and Anne Rice. I like Stephen King the way he kind of creates that tension, and the horror doesn't necessarily have to be gory. So I love that aspect. That probably definitely would influence my style of writing. And I love Anne Rice's way that she's very talented at creating visually the scenes that she sets, which I love as well. So I'm very inspired by the way she does that.
Yes. Like Stephen King, when he writes books, his first book I read was Dolores Claiborne, and that book was really good. So
Yeah.
yeah, I agree with you. And like the books are different from the movies. Like they don't put as much as details as he does in his books. Like
Yeah.
they really mess with you.
Yeah. And that's sort of the horror I like. That sort of the horror that keeps you guessing and sort of wondering what's going to happen next, rather than sort of the shock horror of slasher films. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like a good slasher, but I enjoy writing the tension side of things.
Yes. So, what was your hardest scene to write, and why?
Oh, that's a good question. Probably in Fate's Fury, it's kind of hard to say because I don't want to give anything away, but there's a particular scene that was very emotionally driven, and it was during sort of a really quite fast-paced scene. So it was really hard to kind of make sure that I was impacting all that emotion without rushing it. So that was quite a challenge to kind of build up that emotional tension without losing the pace of the scene. So that took a few rewrites to get it right, but I think it worked in the end, but it was definitely frustrating and challenging.
Wow. Yeah, definitely. You know, when you was describing your books, your in the back, your blinds was like moving, or your curtains was moving, and I
Oh,
was
were
like,
they?
so I was like, I forgot you told me your cat might make an
Yeah,
appearance.
probably the cat. Yeah, don't worry.
I was like, is there ghosts in her house?
No, I don't think so.
So, what advice would you give to help others who want to pursue a writing career?
Just do it. I wasted a lot of time initially, reading on how to be a writer and what to do and what not to do. And it was really just a big form of procrastination. Like, you're not going to know until you actually sit down and start penning out those ideas, and just write. Do it because you love it. And then once you're done, get a good editor. And a good editor is worth their weight in gold if you want to pursue that path and actually get it published. But yeah, I think the biggest hurdle is just to sit down and write, and don't doubt yourself, because that's one of the biggest obstacles and hurdles that you'll overcome. And I still doubt myself all the time, but you need to kind of jump over that quickly, because the more you sort of sit there and think, oh, this is rubbish, no one's going to read it, it's not going to get it done. So you just need to believe in yourself and just write it, because there's nothing more fulfilling than getting to the end of your work and writing the end.
Yes.
And then it's all worth it.
I agree. Like, it's hard to think of. My problem is, if I write my book, it's going to be all over the place. I know it will be, like, because I don't have ADHD or anything, but the way my mind thinks, I'm gonna be on one subject and then a different subject and then another subject. So I'm like, maybe I need to make it organized. Maybe that would help me.
Yeah, I do that. I'm quite pedantic with my plotting, mainly because when I wrote Fate's Fury, there was a period of probably about a year where I didn't touch it, because I had this massive writer's block, and I'd gotten it to a point and I knew how it was going to go, but I've struggled to kind of link the two halves sort of together. And then I did James Patterson's masterclass, and he said there's no such thing as writer's block. If you're stuck, it just means either you haven't done enough research or you haven't done enough planning. And that really resonated with me. So since then, I've been very particular about plotting and planning everything out before I start writing. And that's not to say things don't change and new ideas don't sort of crop up as I go, but the bulk of it's sort of there, ready to go. And I find that really helps prevent that writer's block and going off on a tangent, because I'm prone to that as well, especially when I'm doing the researching for books. I'll start researching one thing, and then 2 hours later I'm on something completely non-related to my book. You just go down the rabbit hole of things that interest you. So I try to be very mindful of not taking that into my writing, but that's where the plotting and planning, I find, really works for me in helping keep my mind in check.
Yes. Okay. That's great advice. This is really great advice. What do you enjoy doing when you're not writing?
Well, spending time with my husband and my daughter, and I ghostwrite as well, so that's sort of my day job. But I love knitting. I'm not very good at sitting and doing nothing. So if I'm watching Netflix or whatever, I've always got to be doing something at the same time. So it's generally knitting and reading, essentially. Yeah, all the nerdy stuff.
So have you read all of Stephen King's novels?
I'm pretty sure I have. I'd have to actually go through his catalogue and check off what I haven't read, but I'm pretty sure I've read most of his, if not all of his work.
Wow. So I want to ask you your opinion before I let you go. So your opinion about Stephen King's, like, what do you think about the books versus the movies?
Look, the movies are always going to be disappointing if you're a Stephen King fan. I think it goes with any book. If you're a fan of the book, the movies are never really going to live up to your expectations, because you're always going to go, but they missed this and they didn't include this bit, and where's this character? And so I guess sometimes there might be benefit for people that watch the movie that haven't read the book, because then they can take it for what it is and enjoy it. But it's never going to be as good. But in saying that, I do enjoy the movie interpretations. Like, I loved Dr. Sleep, even though there was a lot in that was missed from the book. I thought it was still done really well. So I think you just got to take it with a grain of salt, just accept that, that they're going to leave out some of your favorite bits. But that's why you've got the book. If you're disappointed in the movie, you just go back to the book and reread it.
That's true. Like, that's the only film. Well, that's not the only film I like of the book. Well, the movie adaptation of Stephen King, Dr. Sleep. I was okay with it. Like, I knew they couldn't include like the serious stuff in there, like the dad and what he was doing to her and stuff. I knew they couldn't include that, because that probably would have been triggering to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But I definitely agree with you.
Yeah, and it's actually on my to reread list because I did enjoy the remake, and it had been so long since I'd read the book, that I'm sure there was bits I completely forgot about that weren't in it. So that kind of prompted me to put it back on my reading list to go back and reread it so I can find all the little bits that weren't included in the movie that they left out.
I agree. I did that too.
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much, Liz, for coming on my show today and allowing me to interview you.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye. So, everyone, I want to thank you so much for your support and so much for listening to my interview today with Liz Butcher. So, if you would like to purchase her books or see what she's up to, her ghostwriting, or any of her novels, she's a horror writer, which is my favorite. So, if you would like to view any of her books and purchase any of her books, I have linked her website below. It's lizbutcher.com.au. And just go check out her books and shoot her a positive review or a review and shoot her a review. Thank you all so much for listening and thank you all so much for your support. I greatly appreciate it. Have a great day.